today my talk to you with an introduction for those of you who have not read the book about how I started this whole adventure with Turkey and what led me to write this book. And then I'm going to talk about a few other points. One is, who was this Lady Mary Montagu that I'm writing to, and why did she inspire me? What are some of the similarities that I see between Turkey and America, and between Turks and Yankees? I think we have a mixed audience here, so that might be a way we can share some thoughts after the lecture. Why, as a Midwesterner, and I can do this because I'm in Chicago, I live in New York, so why, as a Midwesterner, I felt particularly pulled to Turkey. And I will discuss how I have perceived that Turkey has changed, some of the ways that I've seen that it's changed over the past 30 years. And then I will close with some thoughts about what Turkey has taught me and what I think Turkey can teach the world. Then after that, we'll talk together. My adventure with Turkey began with a rather odd event. Kismet, that's a word that's predestined fate. I wonder if that's maybe what was operating that day. When I was a young student in Paris and I was studying art history, a slide appeared on the screen in front of this lecture showing a building that jolted me from my seat. I had no idea what this building was, but it was seemingly built of golden stones. It had deep carving on it with dancing animals, plants, stars, cursive writing, birds, and it was all framed by the most beautiful lace arabesques. The professor said, "Et maintenant nous voyons ici le Gok Medrese de Sivas." I had never before heard the word Medrese or Gok or even Sivas, much less know where it was. But being the good student that I was, I ran to the library after class and looked all of those words up. I just had to know what was a country that could have built a building like this. And I decided right then and there to go to Turkey to see this building. I needed to go to this place called Sivas to find that building and to see it for if it really was real. And from that day forth, I made a pact with myself to become friends with this country. And I wanted to find more buildings like that one. And I wanted to get to know the people that could have built such a building over many, many years ago. The book is, that building is on the cover. If you want to show me the book here, this is the building right here. It's that building there. You were very kind.
You can keep it.
No,
That's
well, all right.
trouble.
It's fine. At the same time, I was working, Kismet again, I was working for an engineering firm in Paris that prepared translations of calls for tenders for the major French industrial firms. One day my boss called me into his office and he said, "We have a huge project ahead of us. We have to prepare the bid documents for a major French construction company that's going to build a bridge." Ha! And I soon learned that that bridge was none other than the Fatih Bridge in Istanbul. I took this as no mere coincidence, but rather as, once again, this kismet, this predestined sign that I was to become involved with Turkey. And it was also an important indicator to me that I was to become a builder of bridges between cultures, which is what I have done with my professional career in promoting French thought and literature to Americans through my work as a librarian and an educator. And as I came to know Turkey better and better over the extended years of travel, I've been going there for over 30 years, every year, there was never a doubt in my mind that I would not remain forever linked to this country. And it is my experiences and the observations about Turkey that I relate in this book. The spark to write the book came from my friend, the poet, the Kayseri poet Muhsin İlyas Subaşı, who told me that he thought Turks would be interested to hear my impressions of what I've seen over in Turkey over the past 30 years. And at first I thought, well, I don't see how anybody could be interested in what I had to say. But when I got home, I started looking through my travel journals because I kept very, very detailed travel journals. And I began to see that I had indeed, because I had been going to Turkey for so many years, I did have perhaps some observations that I could share with people. But as I set out, I did not have a specific goal in mind. I knew that I didn't have a journal, memoirs type of book, but that I did have several specific goals other than writing this as a present to this poet. I wanted to say thank you to the Turks for all the innumerable, countless kindnesses they have showed me over the past 30 years. And I also wanted to share with them some of the positive aspects that I think that their culture has and that touch me. But the second motivation was also to explain Turkey to my fellow Americans who are perhaps unfamiliar or wrongly familiar about this country, so that they can have a more positive connection with Turkey and its relationship to us. And that is a very important one, as we all know. For the book itself, as we heard in the introduction, it's constructed around an imaginary set of letters that I write to Lady Mary Montagu, an English woman writer who lived at the beginning of the 18th century and who spent 14 months in Turkey in the years 1716 to 1717 as the wife of the British ambassador. This Lady Mary was one exceptional woman. She made a name for herself through her provocative letter writing, which showcased her exceptional intelligence and erudition. Her perceptive wit showed in the comments on everyday life that she included in the hundreds of letters that she wrote home abroad from her family and friends, especially during the year she spent in Turkey, because she did travel quite a bit afterwards. Those letters she wrote home from Turkey are called the embassy letters. They were published after her death in 1763. And they have never gone out of print in 250 years, which is quite a publishing feat, and they're still read by thousands of people today. What is most impressive about her to me as a personality and a writer was that she always showed an unprejudiced eye to her surroundings. As well, I had also admired the ease and the poise in which she showed being a stranger in a different culture. I admire how she reported incidents and facts openly and honestly, never negatively or critically like many of the other writers of her era. She was always an appreciative tourist, always acting as a guest would in someone's home. And I always strived to follow her example on my travels. So in this book, I write to Lady Mary about many of the same topics she touched upon in her letters, written home during her stay in Turkey. She wrote about 50 letters altogether. About 10 were written on the way down, which are very interesting, then another 20 or so when she was in Turkey, and then another 10 on her way home. The two of us were struck by many of the same elements of Turkish culture. But beyond that, I share many things with Lady Mary. We are two women travelers struck by the same things in Turkey at 300 years distant. We are both independent women, and we share a belief in the power of education and the pen, the lessons of travel, the force of religion, and the importance of women's rights. I encourage you all to read her letters, for she is a brilliant, impassioned, and non-judgmental writer. So that was the background to writing the book. In one of the letters in the book, so basically I start each letter off by taking one of her letters where she talks about a specific theme, and then I come in and I talk to her and give her kind of a call and response about, well, 300 years later, it's this way. In one of the letters, I talk about how much I felt at home in Turkey and how much Turkey reminded me of America. Now, this may sound very strange to you, but it's not at all, because we are very similar. The relationship between America and Turkey is very different than the one between Turkey and Europe, where I lived for many years. Americans do not live with the image of the terrible Turk beating down the doors of Vienna in the 16th and the 17th century. Americans do not live with the Gastarbeiter syndrome in Germany. Americans do not live with the eventual repercussions of Turks demanding entry into the European common market. Americans are becoming more and more aware of this country, with its doors now open wide to tourism and globalization of products. Most Americans, and I hope most do, know that Turks are a strong NATO ally and a sound and stable voice of democracy, perhaps the only one in the Middle East. Our countries are physically very much alike. Just looking at our geography paints many similarities. Both are big countries with mountain chains, great lakes, long sea coasts, dense forests, vast open plains, wild climate changes, frightening natural phenomena, earthquakes and hurricanes, mighty rivers, impressive peaks, and immense natural resources. When one looks at our social structure, there are similarities too. Turkey is a country, like America, based on meritocracy. Both are societies made up of citizens who have earned their fame by hard work, not by what they inherited by class, as in England or in France. Both offer its citizens the potential of great social mobility. The Turkish business community is as dynamically entrepreneurial as it is in America, ready to tackle the 21st century on equal footing with the rest of the world. Turkey is full of headstrong, determined, positive, can-do people, not afraid to make mistakes, just like my fellow Americans. It is perhaps in the makeup of our population groups that I feel the two countries resemble each other as well. There are many different types of Turks. All cultures have left their mark in the DNA of the children now being born there. Romans, Byzantines, Persians, Armenians, Arabs, Greeks, Kurds, Georgians, nomads from Central Asians, great Seljuks from Persians, Mongols from the East, and the Ottomans. Its people are as varied as its geography. But to be a Turk today means to be a citizen of the Turkish Republic, and that represents a national rather than an ethnic identity. The Turks of today are both the heirs of the cultural traditions of the Ottoman Empire and the democratic ideals of Ataturk and the West. We, the people of the United States of America, understand this, for we have all come from somewhere else with different languages and religions and educations, and we have united in our pursuit to build a very great country. It is not just the similar physical makeup of our lands and our peoples that makes me feel at home there. Alas, our problems are similar too. I have seen destitute villages filled with hungry children, ramshackle houses, and poverty, both in eastern Turkey and in Appalachia. Like America, the discrepancy between the rich and the poor is staggering. Both countries have recently suffered cruel natural disasters, the Izmit earthquake of 1999 and Hurricane Katrina of 2005. We are both societies riddled with internal problems, violence, and strife. And yes, unfortunately, we both have issues with some population groups that are not entirely integrated into the democratic dream. Yet, we are both free to fulfill the promise of that dream because we are fervent believers in democracy. And even though we could say that both of our democracies have flaws, we have the possibility to correct them. But above all, it was the Midwesterner in me that felt especially pulled to Turkey. In one of the letters, I talk about Türkiye'm, my Turkey, which is the construct of the Turkey that I see, which is far different than the sophisticated and elite Turkey of Istanbul and the seacoast that most tourists visit. There's no denying that the Turkey of Kayseri is very different than the Turkey of Istanbul. Yet it is that Kayseri Turkey that I prefer. I grew up in the farmlands of the great Midwestern state of Ohio. And I am proud of the fact that my feet are never far from the ground, and that the pull of nature to this day, even in my life in New York, is a very strong one. When I came to live in New York, I was often made to feel like by the natives, those New Yorkers, like a bit of a bumpkin. They used to say to me, "Where are you from? You have the funniest accent." And I would say, "I think yours is a little funny too," since I had not grown up in the sophisticated environment of the East. Yet, I knew that the upbringing I received in a milieu where earth, weather, sociability, charity, family, church, and education are the ruling forces gave me a sophistication that was far more encompassing and generous than the elite moderns of urban areas. So it was only natural when I first went to central Anatolia that I felt a kinship with the people who lived there, for they too worked with their head, heart, hands, and health in a larger sense of service to community, country, and the world. I have lived in two of the most sophisticated cities in the world, Paris and New York, but my most remarkable encounters with people have generally been with those who are not worried about their image or external wealth or cultural standing. Turkey is exactly like America in that it's the same wide difference between a citizen from Ohio or Konya and one from Istanbul or New York. But as the French say, vive la différence, and it is this wide range of objectives and lifestyles that make both of our countries all the richer. Another question that is often asked of me, because I've been going to Turkey for so long, is, well, how did this country change over these past 30 years? I that would take a whole other book to write. But, and I do have a very long chapter in the book which enumerates all of the social and cultural things that economic things that I've seen happen in Turkey over the past 30 years. And I refer it to you to trace the evolution of this country from some very dark days of the 70s, of military coups and societal chaos, to the exploding economy of the past decade. Turkey is now the world's 17th largest economy. This is quite something when you think about it. I'm not a political scientist, a journalist, or an economist, so I will leave the discussion of those questions to Stephen Kinzer. But as an educator and an artist, however, I can discuss some of the cultural changes that have struck me, and which for me are as important indicators of the evolution of a society. For example, education. Turkey has substantially increased the educational opportunities for young people today. Initiatives in higher education are booming in Turkey, with the opening of an impressive number of private universities. Turkey is now a participating member in the Erasmus program of educational exchange of the European Union. American universities are filled with Turkish MBA candidates, Fulbright scholars, and medical exchange students. Major Turkish industries are applying efforts for the development of primary schools in rural areas. This is a huge change. The Turkish language is no longer considered an obscure language. It's still a very difficult language, but it's no longer obscure. And it is now taught in many universities throughout the world, and a network of Turkish language schools, primary and secondary schools, operates in many countries. In my world of books, the sector of publishing and literature has made impressive strides as well. The past few years have shown that Turkey is capable of producing a Nobel Prize winner in Orhan Pamuk and a best-selling author in Elif Shafak. Rumi is now a household name in the West thanks to the many translations of the Mesnevi into European languages. The number of books published annually went from 10,000 in 1990 to 33,000 last year. Books are high quality with good paper and graphically appealing covers. Fancy bookstores are now to be found in every city in Turkey. As concerns cultural patrimony, Turkey has seen over the past 20 years the development of a number of outstanding private museums. Perhaps you've seen the Sadburg Hanım, the Sakip Sabancı, and the Istanbul Modern Museum in Istanbul, and the Kadir Has City Museum in Kayseri, as well as the renovation of many state museums. Ottoman Turkish objects are now sold for astronomical figures on the art markets of the world in London, Paris, and New York. The power of the audiovisual image in the seventh art of cinema and television production is booming as well. Turkish films are now shown in every major international film festival and in our local cinemas. The exporting of Turkish television dramas to the Arab world has become a major industry and is a powerful way to export lessons on the Turkish civilization and way of life. One of the reasons I so much love the French culture is the fact that they are so attuned to what is called les arts de vivre, which encompass things that help us live in a beautiful way. Design, fashion, gardens, home design, furniture, architecture, gastronomy, etc., and all types of luxury products and goods. All of these fine arts of living have also developed over the past 15 to 20 years in Turkey to be competitive with the best design shops of the Western world. Lady Mary refers in an unforgettable letter about the luxury of the household goods that she saw when she was received in a home, and especially the gold embroidered napkins that she was too timid to use. They were so beautiful. Turkish products can now compare with the quality of the finest products made in any country. Check the towels sold in a Kmart, and you can be sure that the cotton probably comes from Denizli or Adana. I was in Paris 2 weeks ago. It was a very funny story. And I went with a friend of mine from Chicago, actually, the director of the Alliance Française here, to a fancy men's shop to buy a dress shirt. When I asked the clerk where the shirts came from, because something when I touched that shirt just said something to me, he said with great pride, this Frenchman, "In Turkey, they have an outstanding tradition of textile quality, you know." Now, it is certain that 15 years ago, Turkish goods would not have been sold in a French luxury shop or touted with such pride. And lastly, important for me is what the Turks, that the Turks have understood the importance of what I call cultural transmittal. That is to say, they are capable of taking their past culture, all the while respecting it, and they can translate it into so that the modern generation can understand it and appropriate it to its own sensitivities. Rethinking the heritage of the past to communicate it to the future is important, as it helps the young people of today understand whence they came and the spiritualities of their past. In order for cultural heritage to survive, the Turks have understood this very well. The exotic Orientalist-inspired modern fashions of Rifat Özbek are an example. The reinterpretation of Seljuk and Iznik ceramics by the artists Emeli Faik, Turgut Sana, and Sitka is another. The study and transmission of Seljuk cooking by Nevin Halıcı and of Ottoman palace cooking by Musa Viren for today's kitchens is another. Turkey is not resting on the glory of its past artistic heritage, but is taking it to the 21st century and respinning it for the future. Civilization evolves, and it is important that the past cultures be transmitted in a way that can be understood by young people today. And I will close now with some thoughts on what Turkey has taught me, and it has taught me quite a lot, and also what I think Turkey can give to the world. The fact that two women travelers, Lady Mary and myself, would be struck by the same thing at a distance of over 300 years speaks legions about the strength, individuality, and perennial nature of those cultural factors in Turkish society. The distinctive character of the food, the cosmopolitan population base, the natural beauty of the geography, the refinement of literature and poetry, the importance placed on children, the elegance of Turkish women, and the different path to spirituality offered by the practice of Islam are all factors that spoke to both of us, and as they were very distinctive from our own. They gave us pause to reflect on them and on our traditions as well. I chose to address Lady Mary on these same factors to compare and contrast our experiences, but the bottom line is that these traits remain eternal and their impressions on outsiders everlasting. The description of Lady Mary of the interior of the Selimiye Mosque in Edirne is a good example of the combined visual and emotional encounter with Turkish culture at 300 years distant. I remember sharing the exact same impressions as she did and feeling the exact same emotions when I went into that mosque. Where's the central nave? Where are the chairs? Where's the altar? And as well as being intrigued by the differences in the religious practices and the power of architecture to convey emotion. I suppose the greatest lesson that Turkey has taught me is the need to break free from the social and cultural circles in which we live, the ones defined by family, nation, class, religion, gender, and skin color. We have no choice in being born black or white or female or Irish, but as we grow up, we become surrounded by other boundaries, the ones we may impose on ourselves or the ones that are imposed on us. And if we do not take awareness of the other circles outside of ours, we are condemned to live in a very impoverished existence. The Sufis teach us that life is full of paradoxes, and I see this one as a big one. The bigger our globalized world becomes, the more it allows the creation of very specific and powerful communities of the like-minded. Liberal, conservative, rich, poor, east, west, religious, agnostic, gay, straight, vegan, carnivore, etc. And we must try to transcend the danger of falling too deeply into the one that's ours and not understand other groups. And we know there are several ways to do this, to avoid this danger. One is education. One is making friends with people from other groups outside of ours. Travel to different lands of different cultures. Partaking in the creative arts, both visual and literary. And the exploration of linguistic and religious differences. And it is these opportunities that Turkey has given me in a very gentle and supportive way. And that simple, yet very large lesson of learning to think outside of my circle has been an important one in my private, personal, and professional lives. It has allowed me to reconsider the stereotypes that I hold of other groups and to think about the stereotypes that they must hold of me and to get past them. Yes, there are so many simple things that Turkey has taught me for living my daily life. Turkey, through its overpowering and overflowing and natural hospitality, has taught me to be a thoughtful person by putting people at ease and trying to understand their needs before mine. It's snowing out there, people. I think so. The innate goodness in people's hearts and the joy that Turks feel in putting people together and helping others has stimulated me to be a more generous person. The pride Turks feel in their citizenry, community, and family life has helped me to be a more grounded and secure person. Turks, with their modesty and acceptance of imperfection, which I call the TT, the Turkish touch, and there's a rather amusing chapter in the book on that, has taught me to be less rigid and critical of the world around me. The faith of Turks has allowed me to investigate my own religious practices, which has helped me to deepen my spiritual life. Notably, the lessons of the Sufi masters of Turkey have taught me to think with my heart more than my head, and the importance of the need to feel things rather than analyze them. This has been a large impact on my writing, my art, and my career. And for someone educated in France, this is quite a change of thought. The strong sisterhood of women in Turkey has reinforced my commitment to maintaining at the forefront the feminine values of compassion and understanding in my professional life. Turkish women have taught me that the hearts that are under both covered and uncovered heads beat with the same pulse of affection, generosity, and love. Turkey has taught me the word saygı. How many of you know that word, saygı? It means respect, but it's much more than a word. It's a whole concept that stands behind that word. If I've had a successful career in cross-cultural relations, it's because I have learned that although it is of the most importance to understand social patterns and nationalities, what is the most important is simply to show respect and tolerance towards the others, starting on the individual level. The innate happiness of Turks, they're such happy people, and cheer and their love of life has opened a window of sunshine onto my spirit and their appreciation of life lived in the moment. And lastly, Turks have taught me the importance of a hearty and nutritious breakfast. But larger than my little life, Turkey has a lot to bring to the world. Many years ago, my late mother asked me to explain to her why I was so fascinated with Turkey. This was in 1978. Turkey was, let's just not say it was the same country it is today, and she was a little worried that I kept going over there. I remember distinctly telling her, with all my naive optimism, that I believed this country would play a pivotal role in the future as a reasoned voice in the Middle East, and that I held it to be a beacon of hope for this troubled region. Little did I realize how much this would be needed, and how the events of the last few months in Tunisia, Egypt, and now Libya are calling out for the role model of leadership that Turkey can provide. I also very distinctly, it's clear as a bell in my mind, remember watching with my mother on television in 1979 the signature of the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty between Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. And I was very, very moved at this moment. I remember I cried when I was watching it. I was so moved. Sadat often said that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk was his role model, by the way. His words at this moment bear repeating, especially in view of the events of the past few months. This is Anwar Sadat speaking. Let us put an end to wars. Let us reshape life on the solid basis of equity and truth. And it is this call which reflects the will of the Egyptian people, of the great majority of the Arab and Israeli peoples, and indeed of millions of men, women, and children around the world that we are today honoring. And these hundreds of millions will judge to what extent every responsible leader in the Middle East must respond to the hopes of mankind. I remember turning to my mother at that time and saying, "Mom, this is what I was saying when I said that I believed that Turkey could help in this endeavor in peace. For that road is going to be a long one." And here we are, 32 years later, still traveling on that road to peace. But there is one country that has never wavered on its own road to peace, and has never faltered on its own road to democracy, and that country is Turkey. So perhaps my optimism wasn't that naive after all. There's been much talk of late in the press and in diplomatic circles about the burgeoning role that Turkey can play, or not, as a peace broker in the Middle East. I'm not a political scientist or an analyst, but I speak as a citizen who wants to live in a world of peace. The most important motivation for me to write Yes, I Would was to share with my fellow Americans the hope that Turkey, this emerging giant of a nation, can show Westerners the face of a Middle Eastern country that is reasoned, intelligent, and peaceful. The entire well-being of the world hangs in the balance of this understanding. That is my hope. And I am sure you will all join in me in this optimism. And it can all start with meetings like this one, a tea shared, new friends made deep in the American heartland of Chicago, and a dedicated commitment to the words of the 13th century Turkish poet Yunus Emre. Come, let us all be friends. Let us make life easy on us. Let us be lovers and loved ones, for the earth shall be left to no one. Thank you.
If you were responsible for an American group making their first visit to Turkey, apart from recommending your own book, which I now look forward to reading,
Thank you.
is there a particular book or two books that you would recommend for Americans by way of orientation and getting ready to open their eyes and see and hear?
That's a very good question. Gosh, I don't know. When I first started traveling to Turkey, there were no guidebooks to Turkey, believe it or not. It just didn't exist. Nobody went there. Now there's quite a few guidebooks. I think, oddly enough, the Lonely Planet guidebook is a very good one, fairly reasoned. Sometimes they make snide little remarks, but I think depends on what you're going for. You know, there's so many levels of civilization that you can go to if you want to walk on the footsteps. I mean, there's a very long chapter in my book on what it meant to me as a practicing Christian to go to Turkey. It's extremely moving because you're literally walking on the footsteps of St. Paul, and this is, you know, extremely moving. So that would be one approach. But there's many. I think you just basically get a guidebook with a good bibliography and see the ones that appeal to you. Whether you want the most outstanding book that I think I've ever read on Turkey, but it's very, very specific, and that is the History of Ottoman Architecture. But it's about this thick, but it's very beautifully written, by Goodwin. But other than that, I don't have one in particular that says it all, because, as I said, it depends on what you're going for. Yeah.
Thank you.
There is if you are going for St. Paul things, for example, there is a couple of very good books on that.
Just a brief comment. I do a lot of orientations here, and people ask me that question, what would you recommend?
And what do you
reading?
recommend?
Well, normally I used to recommend Kinzer.
Yes.
Crescent and Star is a very objective
Yes.
book. However, Kinzer needs to write another book.
He did.
Absolutely, because that book,
Reset.
Turkey is incredibly fast changing country.
Yeah.
So it's changing so fast. That's why the book is very good for 2002. Now we are in 2011. So when you read the book, you say, oh my God, these things are changed. Many of these problems were solved already. So this is not the recent Turkey. That's why I'm saying Kinzer is a wonderful person, wonderful author. His language is brilliant, but he needs to write, or at least he needs to update. You would say Crescent and Star 2, or updated version.
He's written a book that came out last year called Reset, where he
Orhan
talks.
Pamuk is a great guy, but he's a literature.
Kinzer is very good, and I will say that I still think people should read Kinzer because the scars of some of these issues don't just heal right away. So there are still some things that, you know, the cultural references to many of these problems that the Turks have gone past. Still, you have to get a deeper understanding of where they've come from.
And two other books are, one is by Finkel, Caroline Finkel's
Right,
Osman's Dream.
right.
It's a beautiful literature taste, Ottoman history, Turkish history. Another one is Finkel, Caroline Finkel and Jason Goodman, Horizons, Sultans of the Horizons.
Right, right. My favorite fiction book on Turkey is Louis de Bernier's Birds Without Wings. That is obviously, it's one of the most beautiful books I've ever read in my life, but it takes place in the 20s in Turkey, and it's quite a beautiful book. There's a lot of very nice fiction books written about Turkey as well. Thank you. I was invited today by the Niagara Foundation to present my book, which is called Yes, I Would, Love Another Another Glass of Tea, excuse me. You think I'd know the title of my book, which is to talk about, it's a book that relates my experiences in Turkey over the past 30 years, and the hope is that I can present a picture of Turkey that is a very balanced picture, and to spread a positive image of this country to Americans. Bringing Americans greater awareness of different cultures is very important to me, and I think you're doing a fine job of it. I've been traveling to Turkey for over 30 years, and during that time I've met some wonderful people who have become now friends. And one of them is a very well-known poet from Kayseri named Muhsin İlyas Subaşı. And one day, Mr. Subaşı said to me, "You know, Katharine, I think people would be very interested in listening, to hearing about some of the things that you've experienced in Turkey over the past 30 years." And after I left him, I said, I can't imagine that anyone would be interested in hearing what I have to say. But when I started thinking about it, he did have a point, because since I've been coming to Turkey for over 30 years, I've seen a great evolution. I'm not a tourist. When I come now, I have, as I said, I have friends, and I have a greater appreciation and understanding of Turkey. So I decided to go back and comb my travel journals and start writing my experiences. And then I connected a dot with Lady Mary Montagu, who is my imaginary friend to whom I'm writing these letters. She is an English woman who lived in the 18th century. She came to Turkey for 16 months in 1717 as the wife of the English ambassador, and she wrote a series of letters back to her friends in England, where she relates what she was seeing in Turkey. And they're very, very beautiful letters. And what impressed me always about them, because I read them a long time ago, was that she was so unprejudiced in her eyes. She never criticized. She was always very open-minded. She was a true ethnographer in the things that she saw. And I decided that I was going to write her a book explaining the Turkey the themes that were dear to her and some of the things that she talked about in her letters. I was going to answer her back and say, well, you saw this 300 years ago. Well, today in Turkey, it's the same or different. And so that's how I constructed the book, as a series of imaginary letters. Lady Mary became very, very real to me. I envisioned her when I was writing the letters. I really did envision her.